Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're going to wait just a second to let those of you who are with us today cycle in, and then we'll get the show started. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to How to Address Your Staffing Issues with the Resources You Already Have. We're really glad that you joined us this morning. Now, before Kelly gets started, we have just a few quick housekeeping items for you. This webinar is eligible for 1 hour of CPE credit. We will launch 3 polls throughout the presentation. To receive credit, you must answer all 3 polls and also complete the short evaluation that you'll receive afterwards. So be on the lookout for an email from Prolera and fill out the survey as soon as you get it. This webinar is being recorded and you'll receive the recording link and the slides emailed you later today. So be on the lookout for that in your inbox also. This webinar will run 50 minutes with 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. Kelly will try to answer as many questions as possible throughout the presentation, and she'll do her best to answer any unanswered questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have a question for her, just put it in the Q&A box located in your Zoom toolbar. To find your Zoom toolbar, just hover your mouse over the top or bottom of your screen and it'll pop up. Look for the Q&A icon. All right, now I'd like to introduce our presenter. Kelly Telford, CPA, is a partner in LSL's Government Services Department and has over 18 years of experience in public accounting. Her background includes accounting, financial forecasting, budget development, public utilities, investment management, grant management, human resources, and information technology. As a government services partner, Kelly oversees engagements for a variety of nonprofit and governmental clients, providing auditing and consulting, often acting as an extension of their finance department. Prior to returning to LSL in 2022, Kelly served as a director of finance treasurer for the cities of Seal Beach and Costa Mesa. All right, take it away, Kelly.
Thank you. Is my audio okay? Can everybody hear me? All right. I think that was a yes.
Looking good.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Jill, for that lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. I see a lot of clients and colleagues on the call. I'm so glad you guys could join us today. This is a little bit different. Normally we do a lot of technical training in CPE. This is kind of a second part of a series that we started during our GASB update back in April, where I talked a little bit about thinking outside of the box, how to address some of your staffing challenges. And trust me, the staffing challenges are prevalent across the government industry. But today, I want to talk a little bit about addressing those same staffing challenges, but focusing more on the resources that you already have. How can you motivate, train, and mentor your people? How to look at alternatives to training, because right now, budgets are tight and we're looking at potential revenue declines, especially with interest rates going up. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the market. How do we still provide that really good training to our people, but lower the cost of it? One of the most effective ways to get more out of the people we have is to cross-train and transfer knowledge from the more experienced people. And then I really want to go into a little bit of a deep dive on putting together growth plans for your people. I'm going to go through a little bit more of a case study, what I did with one of my employees in Costa Mesa that really worked out, and that employee is still thriving today. So I'll go over that towards the end. But really the focus is the people you already have and how to help them be better, which ultimately benefits you. So before I do that, a little bit about myself. Some of you guys have seen these little kiddos before. This is my son, Jack, and my daughter, Maddie. They are my crazy children who are currently playing it up in Newport Beach at camps. We're here on vacation, local, and they are loving the junior lifeguard camp that Newport Beach puts on. So if I've got any Newport Beach folks, thank you for providing that. My husband, Patrick, also a CPA. We have a lot of really enticing conversations around our dinner table around fixed assets and right now leases, because he implemented leases last year for his corporation. This is my family, though. This is why I do what I do, so that I can be here with my work family too. Jill gave a really good background that I was a finance director for a couple of cities. was also a finance director for a department of LA County, which kind of gives a different perspective for those of you who aren't with cities. Some of the experiences and recommendations are going to come from my work at the LACDA. So hopefully it's some good info. I really encourage you to put questions in the chat. Jill's going to be monitoring those, and any questions that come up as we're going through the slides, she'll bring those up so that we can be more timely on answering those. So before we get started, let's do our very first polling question. How many of you attended our GASB update back in April and saw my presentation, finding new ways to do the same work with fewer people? We'll give you a few minutes. Jill, you might have to tell me when the poll is closing.
We're just about there, about 80% participating. Give it another about 5 more seconds.
You'll have to forgive me for my continuous drinking of my Starbucks. We don't have Starbucks. Well, we do, which is far away from where I live. And when I'm here in California, I drink it every day because I love me some caramel macchiatos. So I'll be sipping on it throughout the presentation.
Okay, poll has ended.
All right, so I saw some of you saw the very last question. There was a GASB update in April. I can see a good number of people were able to attend it. We are offering those in a dual environment, in person and via webinar. So I encourage you to look for those. We do them annually, and it's a good CPE to get updated for the year. But what I focused on was a little bit more of how to address those staffing issues given the day-to-day challenges. We focused on a lot of surprising statistics. I'll give you a little bit of those. Most people would be surprised to find out that there are fewer people studying accounting in college and less people are finding accounting interesting. And given that we have a lot of accountants on this webinar, it's probably a little bit depressing. But the reason for that is over the past 20 years, there's really been a heavy focus in college on technology and finance. A lot more people are particularly studying finance because of its diversity. Even for us, we have a lot of college graduates who are applying at LSL who have finance degrees instead of accounting degrees. When we did the GASB update back in April, we talked about some of the challenges with accounting standards that are coming out, and they're becoming, financial reporting is becoming more complex. And how do we do more and comply with all of these new accounting standards, like the lease standard that's supposed to be implemented for 2022? How do we do all of that with fewer people? It's almost impossible to recruit because the population of candidates is less. We're also seeing a lot of retirements. One of the statistics that I had talked about back in April is that somewhere around 75% of CPAs today are expected to retire in the next 10 years. And that is scary because those CPAs, those accountants, are the ones who are doing all of the debits and credits complex accounting. And I equate this a little bit to almost a personnel structural deficit, just like the deficits that we all deal with in city and county and special district government. So a lot of what we have to do is change how we think. We're not going to be able to keep doing recruitment after recruitment and try to solve the problem the same way we always have. We have to look at changing the way we work. I talked a lot about outsourcing, looking at improving efficiencies. These are all possible solutions to dealing with some of those staffing issues. Take a look at our annual budgets. We've got those structural deficits that we need to address. We always look at how do we increase revenues? How do we look at reducing expenses? We need to take that same approach to dealing with the staffing shortages. What are different things that we can do to accomplish more? I gave tons of examples back in April of keeping up with the day-to-day work and how to prepare for when people leave. We talked about outsourcing, even simple things like bank reconciliations. And I know some of you thought I was crazy, that outsourcing the bank rec is just something that would never be considered. But you would be amazed at how many phone calls we've received since that presentation in April asking us to do just that. Now, obviously, it's not our audit clients that are calling us, but we have a lot of audit clients that we work with who are contacting other CPA firms for assistance with bank reconciliation, because that is one of the most time-consuming processes that usually takes an entire FTE to do. Year-end close analysis is becoming really popular. Having an outsourced function for a short period of time. You know, we're doing some year-end close work for a couple of cities, but we're only working with them for a couple of months a year. And it's significantly less expensive to have short-term help than to hire someone permanently. And you have to have them, you've got payments, payroll and benefits for the entire year that you're incurring. We also talked about what responsibilities your team has and determining whether or not there's unnecessary redundancies in some of your processes. Step one of that is actually looking and documenting your processes, which ultimately has the added benefit of being able to help when somebody leaves. It's a lot easier to onboard a replacement or to have one of your other team members step in if you already have those processes documented. And then, of course, we talked about cross-training and providing opportunities and really incentives for other people to learn responsibilities outside of their own. I had given an example that I was working on at one of the cities that I worked at, where I had a technician for utility billing, technician for payroll, and a technician for AP, and I had a cashier that was not utility billing related. So 4 technicians. Nobody knew how to do each other's work. But if one of those technicians left, we were going to be in a bit of a challenge because we didn't have any redundancies from a personnel perspective. We were very lean and mean. But what we had done is provided the opportunity to cross-train and become proficient in 2 areas. So we were just starting to work on like an accounting technician 1 and an accounting technician 2 classification, where the accounting technician 2 was going to, they would be able to achieve the accounting technician 2 if they were proficient in 2 areas like AP and payroll. So looking at those cross-training opportunities are really good opportunities to be able to address these staffing issues. But Jill and I talked, and we received a lot of feedback from that training in April. And one of the things that we really heard is we do think we could utilize some of these, but we're also having challenges with the people that we have. And we know that there's more capacity. We know that the people we have are talented. But how do we get more out of them? How do we encourage them to take control of their responsibilities and do more? And that's what we want to focus on today. So I know it seems like a really tough thing to do, develop our people. I know we think we're doing it every day, but it takes time. It takes dedication. Today, I want to go through staff development, and this is done through improving communication, providing training and development opportunities, transferring some of that knowledge from management or supervisors down to our personnel to be able to provide an opportunity for succession planning. And then I kind of mentioned this case study I want to go through, developing growth plans and actually investing in your people. So I'm going to break these down, go into each one a little bit deeper. But before we do that, let's do our second polling question, and then we'll have a little break from polls for a minute. Polling question number 2. How well do you think your organization does with providing training and development opportunities, making professional development a financial priority, and succession planning? Give you a few minutes. While you're doing that, I'm going to attempt to open the chat and see if I can see. So if it pops up, I apologize.
About another 10 seconds, Kelly, and then we'll close the poll. Still some activity going. Looks like some people want that CPE.
Good thing.
All right, the poll has closed.
All right. So you can see the results on your screens. This is actually exactly what I thought we were going to see. The overwhelming majority make it a priority and do their best, but there's still some room for improvement. I'm not surprised that about 43% are kind of on that lower end. Yeah, we'd like to, but we just don't have the time, or we just don't have the resources. And I'm going to be 100% honest with you. When I was in your shoes as a finance director, I was probably in that middle. We'd like to make it a priority, but with time, it's just not possible. So what I hope everyone can take out of today's presentation are some small ways to make big impacts. And some of it's going to seem obvious, but if we see the true benefit, it might make it an even higher priority than most of what we do. So with that, I will close this and get started. All right. So when I pulled this training together, communication seemed like a no-brainer. I wasn't even going to bring it up. But then I started thinking about how I was as a finance director early on. And, you know, to put it in perspective, I was an auditor for 13 years before I became a finance director. And you all deal with auditors. You know, you're going to start dealing with them here in a couple months at year end. We're not always the most personal. We're not always the most touchy-feely. And when I became a finance director, I had the mentality that I manage my managers manage the supervisors manage the staff, and I just need to worry about managing my direct reports and managing the department, city manager, and council. But I learned really quickly that that was not going to be an effective way to manage my team. So I really think the number one most important way to get more out of the people that we have is to be present and check in with them. Check in with all levels of your team, not just your direct reports. When I first started at LSL, I used to laugh because I was right out of college. I was 22 years old. And Rich Kikuchi and Mike Chu, they're both partners that were here at LSL that have retired now. They would come by every morning, and we're still in the same building that we were always in. They'd go into the kitchen and get their coffee, and they would stop by the cubicles and say hi to the staff. And sometimes that'd be the only time during the day that I would see them. But I didn't realize how much it made me feel a part of their team as a person, not just a position. Stop taking the time to stop by and say, hey, how's it going? Even if it's something client related. Hey, how did Manhattan Beach go last week? Were you able to go to the lake this weekend? We used to go to Lake Mojave all the time in Arizona, and it used to be my only vacations. And they'd always just chat with me for 20 seconds, nothing significant, but it made me feel like I was a person to them. I didn't realize when I became a finance director and didn't stop by and talk to my team. I distinctly remember when I was in Costa Mesa, it was a lot harder because in Costa Mesa, my office was completely separate from the finance department. It really took effort to go talk to my AP folks, to go talk to Treasury. I didn't realize that it made me come across as unapproachable, that my entry-level staff felt like they couldn't talk to me. And I can see a few of you on this call have worked with me in the past, worked with me as a finance director. And for those of you that have worked closely with me, you know that the people that work for me mean the world to me. Our people are our number one asset, and I wholly believe that. But I didn't recognize that my lack of just chatting and saying hello was preventing them from engaging. So I started to change it up. I met with every single person on my team. And I think everybody should do this, even if it's only semi-annually. Once or twice a year, you could do it quarterly if you have capacity. This gives them buy-in. This makes them engage. You can Google employee engagement and find tons of research on employee engagement. All of these things improve that. They improve employee engagement and loyalty because you're opening up the lines of communication. You're providing an opportunity to get to know them as humans, as people who have families. Ask them about their families. Learn about what sports their kids are playing, or if they have a special talent like playing piano. Simple questions, personal questions, help them to engage. We just hired a manager here. She started, I think 2.5 weeks ago. And she interviewed with us and she interviewed with one of our competitors, another CPA firm in the government realm. When she accepted the position with LSL, she contacted the partner and was very candid and transparent and said that she had interviewed with another firm and the other firm had offered her more money. And she wasn't asking us for more money, but she wanted to know how important it was that when we interviewed her, we took the time to ask her about her family. What does she like to do outside of work? Does she like to travel? What sports do her kids play? We talked about our families. Brandon Young, one of the other government partners, the two of us had interviewed her and joked around about our crazy kids. And she said that was what made the difference, was that she could tell we cared about her as a person, not just a manager who was going to turn out audits for us. But if we hadn't had that conversation, if we had solely focused on her qualifications, she wouldn't be with us today. These conversations should also include questions about where does the employee want to go with their career? One thing that I've learned in working in government is that everyone tends to have their defined role and people tend to stay within their box. Now, sometimes that's a culture within the city or organization. One organization that I worked in, HR, and sometimes HR departments are risk adverse. You work within the given parameters of your job description, and you cannot work outside of that. Sometimes it's a labor issue. It really just depends on the organization. I was very fortunate in most of the organizations that I was in. The very last job duty was other duties as assigned. So it gave us a little bit more latitude. Let's start to ask them, what do you want to do in your career? Are there other things that interest you? One of the employees who has worked with me at pretty much every organization that I've been at, he also works for us now here at LSL. It wasn't until I was speaking with him at the last organization I was at where I learned that he had a real passion for flying planes and wanted to become a pilot for Delta. Well, as much as I wish I had that skill and could teach him, the reality is you don't want me teaching people to fly and put people in these huge metal tubes with human lives at stake. But he is a sponge. He is adventurous. And he was always willing to try new things. And talking to him about becoming a pilot created a relationship with him where I knew what he wanted to do in his career. And I knew accounting wasn't the end game for him. But at every organization he came to with me, he did something different. In one organization, he did payroll accounting. In another organization, he did budget and a little bit of purchasing when we had shortages. The last organization I was at, he was my accountant. So he became a real expert with bank rec and month-end close and year-end close. And when I went to go implement a new ERP system, he was ready to roll up his sleeves and help and was really interested to learn the technology side of it. What made it really interesting is now that I'm back at LSL, it's a very different ballgame than being in a government. And because I still spoke with him, he had this loyalty and engagement working with me that he came to work with me at LSL, and I can now provide him with the flexibility to go to flight school and pursue his passion. And he's still giving me 500% here at LSL. But it's because I built that relationship with him and cared about who he was, talked to him about his family. I ask him all the time about, hey, how are your parents? He's loyal and he's a really hard worker and is open to anything. Those are the kinds of things that we should be doing, the conversations we should have to get to know our people. Once you've started the conversation about your employees' careers and what they want, be purposeful in setting their goals. Design goals that are specific to helping them achieve their future career goals. Don't just set a goal of closing, being able to close the month within 7 business days. Be specific and have small baby steps so that they can get to the next level, whether it's a finance manager, finance director. When we get into the case study, I'll go into a little bit more about this, but help them challenge themselves. Allow them to take on more difficult work or to think outside of the box and to find new ways to do the same thing more efficiently. For you as department heads and managers, be involved in these discussions with all of your employees. These meetings are maybe 1 hour a year when we're talking about setting goals and evaluations. Evaluations are another topic. They are critical. Believe it or not, evaluations are something that creates employee engagement. But it's really important that evaluations are specific. It's really easy to fall into a generic trap, meaning that you're basically repeating the same thing every year in their evals. You're telling them that they did a good job, they work well with others, they were able to complete payroll and get the employees and benefits paid on time. But it's really not beneficial to the employee to give them that generic evaluation. And they know that. They don't feel like you're paying attention to them and their goals if your evaluations are generic. Be specific and talk about how they were able to reconcile the bank accounts 3 days sooner because they spent time re-engineering the process and improved efficiencies. Give them credit for volunteering to sit on the safety committee and that, acknowledge that they were consistent in giving feedback back to the department and keeping everybody up to date on what was happening at the organizational level. Very specific things like that in their evaluation shows them that you're paying attention. And while formal evaluations are good and should be done annually, feedback, by definition, feedback, it should be continuous. This is just talking to your people all the time. If someone's doing great, tell them. If you're in the kitchen and you're filling up your coffee and you have a staff member that's standing there in the kitchen, thank them for participating in the department meeting the other day. Acknowledge that they were an active participant and that you value their feedback. Thank them for bringing something to your attention that maybe you weren't aware of, even if that information came from their supervisor. If they funneled it through the channels and it got to you and you were able to deal with something that you wouldn't have otherwise been aware of, give them credit for that. Tiny 2-second conversations have a big impact, and timely feedback is probably the most critical thing you can do to improve employee engagement. But that feedback, again, has to be at all levels, not just your direct reports. I know all of this seems obvious. Looking back on the 18 years that I've been working in and with governments, these are all things that we know we should be doing. And even from the poll a minute ago, we want to do these things, but the reality is we all get super busy. and we feel like there's never enough time to do these things. But if your employees are engaged, they're going to work harder for you and they're going to focus more. In a recent Gallup study, I'm really big on statistics and validating information with tangible data. And in a recent study that Gallup did, they found that engaged employees were 22% more productive. So in one of the organizations I was in, I had 27 employees. If each employee achieved 22% increase in productivity because they were engaged and dedicated and loyal, that would equate to nearly 6 more FTEs, 6 more bodies to do the same work. If you look at it that way, as managers, as department heads, this should be our #1 priority. And I think this is why there's so much focus on employee engagement, not just in government, but across management in all industries. We've for those of you who were at GFOA or listening to some of the other webinars, they've been terming it the Great Resignation that's been happening. Engaged employees don't leave. Most of the time, it won't come down to money. For some people, it will. And when it comes down to money, it'll only keep you happy for so long. But your engaged people stay and they work hard for you. So let's start focusing on this. I also want to talk a little bit about not just the communication piece, but what to do with that communication. Look for opportunities to train your people. If you have this increased capacity, if you're able to get more productivity out of them, then you can train them to do more. It goes back to employee engagement, but it's also trust. You have to trust them to take the lead. Remember, as managers, department heads, we are not supposed to be the smartest people in the room. We are supposed to surround ourselves with people who are smarter than us, and we're supposed to guide, lead, and direct. Allow them to take the lead on a project, even something that is a big challenge that they've never dealt with. Allow them to take the lead on your cost allocation plan and user fee study. Allow them to take the lead on budget development. Allow them to evaluate a process and find solutions. Help them help themselves. One of the things that I did at one of the organizations I was at, I met with each unit, so treasury, payroll, AP, budget, purchasing. I would meet with each unit on a monthly basis. And for my treasury department, I asked them, what's the biggest time suck that you guys have? What takes up the most amount of time? And their response was actually surprising. This was my treasury department. And their response was responding to calls and public records requests related to businesses operating within the city. So essentially what was happening is they were getting phone calls from, some of it was organizations looking for, to send out mass mailers. Sometimes it was like the Chamber of Commerce was asking for information, but a lot of it was members of the public who were frustrated that a particular business was operating in their city, or they didn't like that something was happening. But my business license technician was spending 20% of her time responding to these kinds of requests. And when I found that out, that was insane to me. Like how that should be a focus for her, it just didn't make any sense. So rather than me making a change or me saying, we're going to do this, I brought the team in and I said, okay, well, let's brainstorm. What are our options? How can we reduce the time that we're spending on this? Because there's no value add to the finance department. That's for sure. So at the end of the day, they recommended, they had seen it at another city, and they had recommended that we run a report out of our business license software on a monthly basis of all of the active business licenses and post them to the city's website. And for the public records requests, the city clerk's office could automatically just respond with the link to that post. Anybody who called, easy response. All of our active business licenses are posted on a monthly basis on the city's business license website. Took 2 seconds. Within a few months, the number of calls started dwindling. They knew if they called, they weren't going to get a hand-holding direct response that sent it personally to their email. They had to go find it. 20% more capacity for my business license technician. I finally had someone who could look at delinquent business licenses. In Costa Mesa, we had the fairgrounds, and we had some challenges making sure that during the Orange County Fair that all of the vendors were adequately licensed. We had more capacity to focus on solving those problems too, all because we posted a report on the website monthly that took us maybe 30 seconds to run the report and post. Encourage your people to solve those kinds of problems. Don't be afraid to let them take control and allow them to make mistakes. It's okay. It's important that we learn from those mistakes and don't repeat them, but allow them to fail so that they can grow and get better. Another thing that we can do is invest in their development. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to show you some low-cost trainings and ways to develop your people. These are a little bit more, in some ways, a little bit more high cost. GFOA and CSMFO, this is more focused for our California clients and the California folks on the call. For those of you who aren't in California, every state has an association similar to CSMFO. This is essentially the state's GFOA. But for GFOA, there's the CPFO program, which is a certification program. It's a certified public finance officer. It does cost money. There is an investment, but this is really good for folks who are looking to become your next finance manager, are looking to become an admin services or a finance director. I think these types of programs are really good to build into growth plans that we're going to go over in just a few minutes, because these give our people the tools to promote the things that you can't teach on the job. The Leadership Academy with GFOA is very similar as well. The CSMFO coaching program is actually really beneficial, and I don't think a lot of people take advantage of it. This gives you an opportunity to assess the skills that you have compared to the skills that you need to move up. It goes through all of the responsibilities that we have in the finance department and all of the transactional type duties. And it asks, do you have that skill? And if not, how can you get that skill? There's also a resource matrix that's really helpful. And I provided the links for everybody here. The resource matrix gives you resources to look at for purchasing. Resources, where can you go for purchasing information or training? Where can you go for treasury information and training? I really encourage everyone to look at these links and see if there's something that could be helpful. I know if you look, you will find things that will help your team. The CPFO, I think, is probably more focused on your succession planning and your next director. I personally know a finance manager here in Southern California that went through that program and really found it valuable. And he's now a director. And that gave him those tools, very similar to an MPA program, where he now has not just the debits and credits accounting, but he has the management piece as well. This is the one I know everybody's looking for. This is your low cost trainings. One of the things that, and I'm guilty of this, when we were trying to address our deficit issues, training was usually the first thing that got decreased. And I didn't like it, but our training budgets are huge, not just for finance, but the engineers, in public works and community development, police. Police is excruciatingly important. But a lot of those are conference type trainings, or they're 3 or 4 day training sessions that are in Chicago or Florida. If we focus on webinars a little bit more, and that is one benefit of COVID, is it forced us into a virtual environment, just like we're here today doing a webinar. If you look more for webinars, even multi-day trainings through webinar, you're going to save significantly. You may spend $500 or $600 on a 3-day training that's virtual versus, especially right now with fuel prices, $3,000 for airfare, hotel, rental car, per diems. It's much, much more expensive to send people away for training than to do it through the computer. I will say though, what I think is really important is if you are doing webinars, encourage your team to either work remote and do it from the comfort of their home so that they truly can focus, or schedule them in a meeting room or a conference room to do the webinar. Because if you're in the office trying to do a 3-day training, you're being interrupted all the time. It's a lot harder to pay attention to the webinar and a lot easier to get bogged down with the day-to-day work. But this does mean that your dollar goes further. For $600, you can send far more people to that webinar than if you were sending one person at $3,000. If you are doing in-person trainings, try finding local options. GFOA does in-person trainings in Long Beach a lot of the time, but they do it throughout the state. I know those in-person ones have declined a little bit because of COVID, but they are coming back. So look for ones that are in your area. Take advantage of free CPE from CPA firms. Just like the one that we're on right now, it's no cost. I can tell you right now, with my husband being on the commercial side, he still has to keep his CPA license active. I just emailed Jill a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, can you add my husband to our mailing list for all of the webinars in-house so that he can get CPE that way? But it's not just us. As much as I want to promote LSL, we're not the only CPA firm that does it. A lot of other CPA firms do as well. So look, all you have to do is Google us and our competitors, and you'll be able to see webinar calendars. I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but the AICPA has an annual webcast pass. So this webcast pass gives you access to a ton, probably thousands of trainings annually. And it's a single cost for access to all of them. You don't pay per training. And there's a lot more than just accounting. There's soft skills training, there's how to have difficult conversations, how to provide effective feedback, how to manage projects. There's tons of information through that annual webcast pass. When I was at Costa Mesa, we used that, at least for the first year we used it, and I would send around the list of all of the webinars that were available, and my team could easily sign up. I would highlight which ones I thought might be beneficial for purchasing versus treasury or AP. There was even trainings on 1099 changes, especially with the new 1099s that came out. Look for those kinds of trainings that are one-time cost with huge benefits. CSMFO and GFOA do have webinars. They're very low cost, especially because most of us are members. And if the city or organization isn't a member, usually your finance director and finance manager are, and you can utilize those memberships to be able to still get the low cost. They have everything from short webinars, like 1-day topic or 1-hour topics like ARPA, but they also have much more broad topics like an intermediate government accounting series. So if you have your accountant who's doing day-to-day debits and credits type of work, but they're I wouldn't say they're getting complacent, but they're ready to broaden their horizons and learn a little bit more, send them to that intermediate government accounting series. It's a 3-day program that gives them a little bit more complex understanding of accounting, and then challenge them when they get back. Hey, what did you learn? Talk to them about it. What were some of the things that you were really surprised by? Is there anything that really interested you that maybe you'd like to try here? That's a part of how you can increase capacity just by trainings, or just by sending someone to a training. The last two on here, CAPO and CMRTA. CAPO, for those of you who aren't involved in CAPO, this is your purchasing, very similar to CSMFO, but really focused on purchasing. The CAPO, I've worked very closely with one of the CAPO board members over the years. That group is fantastic, especially if you have challenges with purchasing policy, purchasing best practices. It's a very small membership fee, and they have a lot of low cost and free educational seminars, but they also have really good resources, very similar to the CSMFO member bounce, where we post questions and everybody responds with what they are doing. Or you could do polls where hey, what is your purchasing limit? CAPO is very similar to that, but heavily focused on purchasing. Really great community of folks, and they'd be a great resource for your purchasing people as well. And then CMRTA is really focused more on revenues and taxes, your treasury people. These are ones, I've been to the conferences. I actually really like their trainings better than I like their conferences, especially for staff. The conferences really are geared more towards management, but still really great resource for your treasury folks. That's not your day-to-day debits and credits. And all of these, you could have a $5,000 training budget in your department and provide training to everybody within these parameters. You could probably do a CPE, a webinar every month, and still be within that budget. And then not just investing in one person's development, but your whole team. Register for a webinar and schedule a conference room and have everybody participate in the conference room. So you pay one fee and 6 people benefit from it. We used to do this. We'd schedule our finance conference room and I'd order in lunch, and we'd all sit around the table and have lunch, and you'd hear the chit chat as the presentation was going about, oh, see, we talked about this. Let's have a conversation about this after. It's a really great opportunity to engage a group of people. So I want to talk for just a minute about transferring knowledge and succession planning, and then I want to go into the case study because I only have a handful of minutes left. We talked a little bit about having each of your staff list out what their responsibilities are in that the GASB update that we did in April. Super simple. Sit down with an Excel spreadsheet and have your team list out what they do from a task perspective on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually basis. Once you know what your people are doing, have your people talk to one another. And if you have a supervisor who's doing the annual state controller's report, see if one of your staff would be interested in learning that. I know nobody thinks that the state controller's reports are that sexy or that fun. I know we do a whole lot of them here, but having that trust in your people and challenging them, not only will it add capacity to your supervisor and allow them to do other more important things, but it challenges your lower level people and starts transferring that knowledge to all levels. I talked a little bit about that idea with the accounting technicians. Have AP check payroll. Now, if you're in a fully electronic payroll system, sometimes you're doing more triaging and running reports for payroll. But if your payroll person is actually doing data entry of time cards, have your AP person be their checks and balances. You don't need to have your finance manager tick and tie every single paper time card to the actual input in your payroll system. Have your payroll person review AP. That usually is manual entry. And errors happen, whether it's coding errors, whether it's transposing numbers. Have your payroll person double check that. And there's cross training, there's transferring knowledge so that if a vacancy happens, you at least have someone familiar with the process who can step in and help. Finally, we talked a lot about communication. I know when I was a finance director in a large department, I met with my supervisors and managers, but I didn't really meet with each division group, at least not at first. Consider sitting in on budget or purchasing unit meetings, even if you're not participating. I gave credit to a finance director that I watched sit in on a meeting about ARPA. I don't know if he's on this call right now, but I was really impressed with how he managed his team. He knew all of his team members knew the answer to what they needed to do to report ARPA funds, but they didn't have the confidence to make the decision and execute. He didn't provide the solutions. He merely sat in on the meeting and he encouraged them to make those decisions. And he gave them, yep, you're on the right track. You got it. Include your staff in those meetings, not just supervisors. And remember, as you're encouraging them to make those decisions, I said this before and I'll say it again, mistakes are going to happen. You can't learn if you're not making mistakes. So be kind, be patient, and help them learn from those mistakes. Provide that safe space so that they're willing to try new things going forward. And then real quick, I know Jill, we've got our timeline. I really want to talk about developing growth plans. I want to talk about, I'm not going to go through what's detailed on the slide. I want to talk about a case study. I had an employee, amazing employee. She was my management analyst and she's still an MA for another organization now. But she has tremendous promise. One of those people that just picks things up very quickly. You don't have to give step-by-step instructions. You know, you can, something she's never done before, you can give her direction and she runs with it. And you can say, I need an agenda report for this. And an hour later, it's in your inbox and it's written better than I could even write it. She wants to be an admin services director. That's her long-term goal. And there's multiple steps to go from management analyst to an admin services director. And she's not really a debits and credits person. She doesn't have the accounting background, but she wants to learn it. And recognizing that potential, I sat down with her and built a growth plan. I took the time to learn what she wanted to do with her career. And I also encouraged her to research what she thought she needed to know to get to that next step. Going back to that skills assessment with CSMFO, what are the skills that you have today? And what are the skills that you're going to need to get to the next level? And it wasn't a management analyst to admin services director. It was, at that point in time, it was management analyst to budget and purchasing manager. What's the gap? What do we need to learn to get to that step? And I encouraged her to take control of it, and she led the process and I guided her. But she built out, I mean, this is just a part of who she is, but it was an amazing process. She built out a Gantt chart that had the overarching skills and tasks that she needed to get to that next level. And we built a timeline of how am I going to support her with trainings? How am I going to support her with opportunities? And how are we going to get her the information and the skills that she needs to have so that in 18 months, she is prepared for the next step, that budget and purchasing manager. The level of engagement was crazy. She felt like I was taking a personal interest in her career. And a part of it was selfish because, you know, as a finance director, I personally benefit from her development and her learning and her moving up. But it also taught her how to take charge of her career and how to have those conversations with me, even though I was a department head, how to ask for the opportunities. She would come into my office regularly and say, hey, I found this training on purchasing. It's really more on the legal side of purchasing, but I think it would really help me have a better understanding of why we have the policies we have. Is it okay if I do it? Here's the cost. She always tried to keep it, and I absolutely 100%. And we met quarterly to go over her progress. And unfortunately, I left before we had gotten through those 18 months, but I still keep in contact with her. And the finance director that she's working for right now absolutely knows the skills and the level of dedication that she has. Identify those people who you know have tremendous potential and really challenge yourself to encourage them to tap into it. These growth plans, and if anybody's interested, I'm happy to have more of a one-on-one coaching on how to develop a growth plan and how to have those conversations. Critical changes happened with the amount of work and engagement from that person. Talk about a 22% increase in engagement, more like a 500% increase in engagement, because she asked to take on projects. She is the one who ultimately did our cost allocation plan and user fee study. She wanted, it wasn't me offering opportunities so much as her being eager to jump in. This is the number one thing I think you can do to help to solve your upper management succession planning challenges. Critically important, but you also have to make sure that you allocate, you can't, it's not a 1-year plan. It will never be a 1-year plan. Build it out over 18 months, 2 years. I would encourage people to build out a 5-year plan, especially if you have managers who ultimately want to become city managers. Loop your city manager into it, or your general manager if you're a special district, and ask them to help coach your people. I have found that a lot of city managers are really good coaches. They're really passionate about the people. So look at this opportunity as not only a way to help solve your staffing issues, but a way to build loyalty and engagement. So with that, I will ask the powers that be to launch poll question number 3. It's your final question for CPE, but please don't hang up yet. Do you think you will employ some of these ideas in your organization? Give it a couple more minutes. I'm peeking into the questions in advance, Jill. I hope that's okay.
For sure. We're about 83%. I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds, then I'll close. The poll has closed, and Kelly, it looks
wow,
like
that was a little overwhelming.
Even if somebody wasn't going to employ these ideas, which why wouldn't they? They did not say.
Yes. Well, I appreciate that. That tells me that some of these, and I feel like a lot of these were obvious, but I don't think we always put it together with the benefit side. And I'll tell you, when I did a lot of that research and saw that Gallup poll with that 22% increase in productivity, even here at LSL, immediately I thought of, okay, how can I employ some of what I did in city government here at LSL? Because these are not specific. Sorry, that was my timer to make sure I didn't go over. These aren't specific to government. These aren't specific to CPA firms. These go across all industries, and it's really a part of managing people. Okay, so that is the end of the presentation. Jill, is it okay if I go into the chat? There's a couple of really good comments that I actually want to point out.
Absolutely. We've had a lot of great activity in the chat. Go for it.
All right. Can you actually see the chat on my screen? Or no?
No, you can just read it.
Okay. I was hoping it was actually showing. So Kim, I'm gonna pick on you for a minute. Kim Scott wrote that on annual evaluations, she always lists out what she would like her team to work on in the next year, but she also asks them to come up with goals for themselves and to let her know how she can help them accomplish it. That is critical for evaluations. So I've been in organizations where, and this is the hardest part about government, is you can't just make up your own evaluation format. It's got to go through the unions and HR, and it's a whole to-do. But I've been in organizations where the department head or the supervisor basically just fills in the boxes. The boxes are incredibly generic, and it really doesn't do any good. Having your people give self-evaluations. Having your people, when I was at the county, we did this. I was very fortunate there that my people weren't under unions. They were required to evaluate how they did over the past 12 months and give me a new set of goals for the new year. And we would sit down every year and we would talk about, okay, how did we do? What were some of the things we hoped to accomplish that maybe we weren't able to? And how can we move forward and achieve some of those personal successes? To me, evaluations and goals aren't necessarily department successes, they're personal successes. And Kim, you are right on target. How can you help them accomplish it? And it goes back to that slide about giving them opportunities for development. I also see Jill, you had kind of tacked on a comment about we try to cross train, but it has been more difficult with COVID. You're absolutely right. Employee engagement is down right now. And LSL is personally feeling this because most of our folks are working in a remote environment. And how do you create engagement without being in the next office or being able, like I gave that example with Rich Kikuchi and Mike Chu, where they would come along with their coffee cups and stop at the cubicles and chat with us in the morning. And I think this comment was from Kim too, absolutely critical to make it a point to personally check in. I've got reminders on my calendar, and yes, I need the reminders because my brain is crazy, to check in with my direct reports, to check in with my team, schedule outings, schedule Zoom type events, schedule lunch and learns, or, if you're in a remote environment, have everybody log in for lunch. Maybe as a development, send out a Grubhub gift card to your team and have them order in lunch. And all of you sit there and talk about, what have you guys been doing? How's the summer going? Are the kids out of school? Have they been doing any really cool camps? Really make the effort. I think, Kim, you're right on target that you have to make it a point. Jill, I see you posted the upcoming webinars. I do want to mention that they're not always government specific, but we have great content that's coming up in some of our upcoming webinars. And almost all of them are free. Just like I mentioned, training opportunities for your team. Check in and see if there's any webinars that might be of interest and sign up. We'd love to see you.
Please do. We don't have any scheduled for August, but like Kelly said, check back frequently. And there's always great recordings of past webinars for you to take a look at also. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, Kelly, is CPE. Can you just forward to that last slide for me? To get your CPE, thank you all for filling out the following questions. To get your CPE, one more slide, Kelly.
Just kidding.
Nope. Okay. Nope. So please be on the lookout for an email from ProLara, and that will contain an evaluation that you need to fill out. And once you fill out that evaluation, you'll get your CPE. It also asks a few questions on how Kelly did today. I'm sure she's going to get 5-star reviews, but we really do appreciate the honest and thoughtful feedback. And with that, I will pass it back to Kelly to close out. Oh, one more quick thing. A few of you asked, Will I get the slides? Yes. You will get the slides and a link to the recording of this webinar. Look for that later today, emailed to you.
All right. Thank you, Jill. And honestly, if you know, I know these are more soft skills, management type topics, but I'd still love to have conversations with you. So if you're looking to just chat about ideas or hey, I've got this challenge in this unit of, you know, maybe it's your purchasing department, and I'm really looking for ways to give them more training or educate them more. Our team has, especially myself and a couple of members that have worked in government in the past, we've sat in your seats. We've walked a mile in your shoes. So if you guys need any help at all, give us a call, even if it's just a quick conversation and you're just looking for some feedback. We're here to help you. So the slide, I think that's showing has my contact information plus the LSL website. Reach out, tell us how, you know, what issues you guys are going through, and let us know how we can be of assistance. You know, we're not just your auditors or your advisors. We're here for everything.
And with that, we want to thank you all so much for attending today. And we appreciate the time you spent with us, and we will see you again next time. Make it a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.